Okay, the first topic today, the startup ecosystem. Recently, our Prime Minister has been talking about it. It was in news. So let us see what are its achievements, what is its significance, as well as its opportunities, as well as its challenges associated with this startup ecosystem. Why is it important as such? So tell me first, what is a startup? How will you define a startup? You need to write this when you write an answer in your mains, no? At least some basic idea, something you need, something the idea that you have, you need to scribble it there.
An innovative idea.
An innovative idea. Is it just an idea?
Which can be implemented with proper resources.
Outcome oriented. Something we should talk about. See, the company which is in initial stages of its operations. But as you said, a startup has an enterprise or an entrepreneur who is having an idea, who wants to convert that idea into a product or a service and cater it to the new age customers. Like you want to introduce some kind of new product or new service, right? That is how you'll have an idea and bring that innovation and bring that new product or service. That is the characteristics of any startup, right? If you remember these characteristics, you will be able to define any startup. What is a startup as such? So tell me, what is unicorn startup then? $1 million? 1 billion, yes. Okay? Greater than 1 billion. Right? Anyway, now tell me, significance of startup. Why do we need startups? Okay, employment, very good. GDP growth, okay, GDP, increase in rate of GDP, and then new products or service, yes, which is in definition itself.
You can decrease dependency on foreign.
Yes, very good. Foreign funding or something, dependency. Okay, very good. Then indigenization, yes. Where talking just indigenization is not necessary, no, we should elaborate it properly. Where there are several sectors in our country where we are depending on foreign thing which he is talking about. Tell me one sector. Manufacturing we are depending, no, some we are having, no. Manufacturing sector only, but you should, I am asking about the sector means I am not talking within the manufacturing, which are the areas which you are finding it lacuna. Automobile, no, automobile we are very strong. Tata cars are being sold in foreign countries. How can you say automobile? All refineries are all. We are having very good refineries here. Chips, who is telling chips? Microprocessor chips, semiconductors. These are very much necessary for developing electric vehicles or else manufacturing our own supercomputers. Space sector, not that much dependent, or else take the defense sector itself. How much are we importing? That part is also there. We are going to cover that particular area in today's class. So that kind of indigenization, that innovation and also meeting the aspirations of youth is one more significance there. Now we are aspirational youth, right? We don't want to become, get employed somewhere, but we want to create employment. That is what the aspiration of this today's youth is, right? So in that way you can write several points like significance. And then India has that kind of significance in ancient times, somewhere down the line that has been missed, right? China and India used to cater to 24% of the world GDP. And 27% of world manufacturing production that is taking place since the medieval times or since the coming of British. That means what kind of innovation or startups used to be there. Okay, somewhere that nature has to be brought back, right? So what are the achievements till now? So government has done very good work. We should appreciate in that fashion at least. Okay. So tell me, what are the achievements? What is the present status of India's this startup ecosystem? Rank third largest startup ecosystem is present in India, and it is covered in economic survey. Last year and previous last year, 2 years, they were talking about economic survey, and they have given certain demographic relations also. You go through them in economic survey. Okay, there is small point which is said that district wise they have selected, and wherever the district has been performing in education well, in education levels they are performing well, there the startups density are increasing. That kind of correlation they have brought up. These kind of facts are very much important for you to write when you write an essay, even mains answer or else even essay. That is very much required, no? So taking those points are very much necessary for you. So third largest startup ecosystem in the world. Where is the first two?
USA.
Second?
China.
Yeah, obvious. Okay, then see, in the year 2000 there were around some 500 startups. Now it more than 35,000, more than startups are seen. Okay, and then coming particularly to unicorn startups, there were 27. Now it has reached to 41 this particular year. Okay. So which of the state-wise variation is also there, no, in startup ecosystem. So which state or union territory do you think that it is performing are having more startups coming up? Hyderabad or Bangalore? No, both are wrong. No. Delhi and NCR region. 23% of startups are coming up. In India, 23% of startups that are building are coming from that particular region. Next comes Bangalore. Okay, I don't know what the position of Hyderabad. Don't ask me that. Okay, but anyway, there are startups, right? And then peculiarity or very significant part is that even during the lockdown period or during this COVID pandemic, they have been creating value. Startups have been creating value, and they have been the forefront in providing what you call as tele education or tele health. Now there are several apps, Practo app, Docs app. Now if you yearly if you pay some 1500 or 2000 rupees, yearly you can have as many as consultations that you want with any doctor, and whole family can use it. See the nature of it, and see if take the rural areas, they are unable to have access to any kind of health or anything through these apps or through these new age technologies. They are able to access that. It is there. You just go and download these apps and find out. They are very innovative. In that fashion, so the startup ecosystem has been achieving some things. Of course, there are certain challenges, and also there are certain drawbacks or certain areas which are left by this startup ecosystem that we are creating right now. But tell me the opportunities that were seen during this rise. Because of those opportunities only we are seeing that rise, and we are attaining this status as the third largest startup ecosystem. So tell me, what are those opportunities? What do you think? Indian economy itself is a big opportunity. Indian economy is still consumption driven. Okay, there is purchasing power increasing to every individual, right? And then economy is in the recovery stage now. After few years of between 2008, after 2008 we had certain decrease in GDP rates. Now they are increasing gradually, they are picking up. The consumption trend is picking up. So this kind of huge size itself an opportunity for creation of very robust startup ecosystem, right? Indian economy itself, nature and size. Size of Indian economy, right? And then tell me, second one, demography. How will you bring out this demographic point? How will you bring out? demography? Aspiring youth only. They want new age products. They are ready to accommodate or acquire or access these new products that they are there in the market. Tell me one simple example. Huh? No, the product. Tell me one product where the new age demography is more active in consuming it.
Swiggy.
Or something like that. Yeah, Swiggy. Very good. Or else ready-made products, cooking products, right? These are new startups that are coming up, which are very much relevant for us. So demography or the youth, where 50% or half of the population is below 25 years. Now, after 10 or 5 years, see the demand that they will create. If they come out of, if they become economical, if they start earning, right? So demography is the second topic, second area or second opportunity that the startups are trying to acquire, right? So tell me, can you install any, their government support is very much necessary. What is the kind of government support that we are seeing in the startup ecosystem? Are there any initiatives that you can talk about? Huh?
Education, Atal Innovation Center.
Yeah, very good. That is Atal Innovation Mission. Who is running it? Niti Aayog? Yeah, be clear there, okay? None of the ministries are taking up there. What else? Remember, in 2016, Startup India program is there. Stand Up India is different for, okay, that is different. Of course, you can write, mention that also, because Stand Up India is what, for what? No, not just tribals, for women, SC background, ST background, who want to become an entrepreneur, they can start up and the government will be supporting them. And there are 3 kinds of loans that they will be giving, Shishu loan, Trishur loan, please go through it. Okay, I am not particularly talking about these particular schemes, I want to discuss about startup ecosystem. Okay, getting my point, no? There are 3 kinds of loans that are provided in Stand Up India program. Okay, go through them. What else? See, revolution, digital revolution with the UPI has created that opportunity for startups. Just now I spoke about the Practo app or this Docs app or anything. UPI, simple payment, they are able to access services and products. Right, that has created a digital revolution and then that is supporting several startups right now. Right. So the startups are becoming pan-India. How are they becoming unicorn? When they are able to cater their services or products to a huge market, right? When will they have that market? When they are having that proper internet connectivity, when they are having that payment services that are easily accessible for them, right? UPI has done that. And then 4th point, can you talk about any other opportunities? Funding is very much required. Only disturbance has been the angel tax. Okay, angel, now the disturbance has been removed. That was one of the challenge. Anyway, you can write it in the challenges. So initially they were the investors who are trying to invest in startups, they are taxed in the sense that has gone wrong with the startup ecosystem. Now it has been renewed. Now funding, there are ample investors from foreign as well as from domestic sector. They are coming up. However, one of the challenge which I should mention here itself is that mostly funding is from foreign only again. The capital, again the capital funding that is coming for the startup ecosystem has been more from foreign investors rather than the domestic investors. Okay, that is one challenge there that we need to address. What else? Can you talk of? The role of technology itself is creating that opportunity. Now everybody has access to mobile phones, laptops. That has again created the opportunity, no? So access to technologies, and they are getting cheaper and cheaper. that has very big important role. Okay, mostly people tend to neglect or overlook it, that it has no role. But because of technology itself, the access of this technology are all new age technologies that are coming up. Now you can simply sit in your home and learn a course and develop your own app. That is possible. That is because of technology only, right? And then, are there any other opportunities that you can think of? No? Okay, mostly these are enough. Do I not strain your brain too much? No, tell me the challenges.
I think it's
Which I told you, funding, yeah. Funding, there are two kinds of challenges that we can see. Mostly the investors have been foreign investors. Okay, the main reason has been the venture capital industry in India is very nascent stage. Okay, it is not that strong. It does not have that risk appetite within it. It is not ready to take such risks. That is what one of the problem with the funding. And then any startup, in order to sustain, having an idea and converting into a product is not just that. Okay, there is a lot of operating process, operating cost or working cost that goes into any startup, and because they are unable to maintain that operating cost or working cost. And then now banking system has been not that robust at that part for a particular time. Okay, since the past 2 to 3 years, they are unable to fund properly. And then the banks are also not ready to invest in these startups because it is risky for them also. No? Already they are having huge NPAs. Right? The funding in that way, two ways. Okay, in that sense, the startups are unable to meet their operating capital or working capital. Right? Second, human resource. Okay. Suppose you are a very good data analyst. Okay. And there are two companies, A and B. It is an MNC established for the past 20 years. Okay, it is a startup. It has an establishment years of 3 years or 5 years. And I have a huge skill rate. Where will you try to work? MNC only, no? Natural choice. Highly skilled. And they'll also have enough income to earn from these MNCs. The startups won't be able to provide such kind of income to that particular kind of skill level that person has. Right? That is one challenge. They are unable to attract skilled manpower. In the sense, on the other hand, most of the people who are unskilled are trying to apply jobs in the startups. And startups, it is such nature of that job will also be not so clear that person has to work several things. Not just the thing that the person has. If he is a data analyst, he has to type or sit on the computer. No, some kind of administrative work is also being provided to them. Such kind of work culture has not been properly developed in startups right now. In not most of them, it is a problem. Right, some startups are unique. They have become unicorn, means they are doing well, but that kind of work culture problem is present. Right? What else are the challenges that you can think of? Or else changes in government policies can also create a challenge. Lack of stable policy. With the angel tax investors, that has been the problem, no? So that change, why to bring in angel tax? Previously it was not there. Okay, and they brought it again in the year 2018 or 2017, and they removed again in 2020. This kind of things, and then taxing the startups itself. Initially they said that if they cross certain amount of revenue, they will be taxing them. No, startups are very budding industries which they need that working capital, they need this cash reserves with them in order to invest in areas of expansion. You are getting my point, no? So in that way also, if you think they require their reserves or their profits to with themselves. If they tax, the government start taxing them, it won't be good. And then fourth major problem, which I was also already talking about, is skewed nature of ecosystem. Why I am saying this? Why am I saying this is a skewed nature? Because startups, the recent startups that we are seeing are coming up in either e-commerce sector or fintech companies, financial tech companies. Most of them are concentrated in these areas. What else space? Where is defense? Of course, for space or for defense, they require huge capital. I'll agree. But still, we need it, no? Can you tell me any private industry which is in defense sector? No. No, I can say, but anyway, there are very few. There is something called Paras Defense and Info. There is one. Recently, it has been in news. Okay. So it provides some kind of drone services or some kind of chip services to our defense for our army and navy. Okay. There are very few players. Right. These are the four major challenges that you can think of. Additionally, you can write many things, you scribble, but majorly somewhat innovative ideas which I can tell you and help you to write some meaningful sentence is very much required, right? And then you can track as many. And how will you address these challenges? That will be the question, that will be your conclusion whenever you write an answer. And then government initiative, as I said, I have been telling this in every current affairs class that I am telling. Production linked subsidy scheme is very much important for our startup ecosystem. It has been very good very good step, right everywhere wherever it is possible for you guys. I'll tell you why it is important. Previously, there used to be something called as size-based subsidy scheme. If a company is small, they used to receive higher subsidy from the government, which is creating some kind of dwarfism in micro, medium, small scale industry sector, okay, MSME sector. Some kind of dwarfism is being created. That means these sector companies are not willing to grow. They are getting that government support, no? So staying small itself is an advantage for them. You're getting my point, no? That change in that government policy is much required. That is why a production linked subsidy scheme, I think it will be in mains this year. Definitely it will be there. Otherwise there is something wrong with UPSC. Probably. Okay, we'll end here. We'll go to the next topic. So judicial transfers, this was in news. So there is recently Madras High Court or even Chief Justice has been transferred to Meghalaya. So if you remember 2 years back, same incident has taken place, but that judge has resigned. She did not accept the transfer and she resigned from the post of judiciary itself as a judge. So why is it this controversy coming up every time? Okay, before discussing it, let us see the constitutional background with these judicial transfers. So Article 222 talks about the transfer of High Court judges as well as the Chief Justice of High Court. So any High Court judge or a Chief Justice of High Court, okay, can be transferred by the President in consultation with CJI. Okay, we'll read this article even in our Lakshmikant till here only, but there is additional provision for this article also. The judge who is being transferred will be provided compensatory allowance. Remember this point. Probably they might ask in prelims. Okay. some money is being given for the person who is transferred, okay, as a compensatory allowance. This has been in this provision itself, in this article itself. Okay. And then what is the controversy? Tell me. So one thing, the controversy arises due to the one fact only. The government does not specify the reason for transfer. Okay. The problem comes from there only. So there are two arguments for it, one in favor and one against. Why the government not providing the reasons of this transfer is good for ourselves, for our constitution working or for our judiciary. Why? Because it is considered that not giving out reason will help the judge who is being transferred will not be impinged, or he will be staying in working independently. So he will not have some kind of biasness or something like that. He won't be developing such kind of things in the new high court that he might be going. So that is what one positive argument, that is valid reason which we should accept. But not specifying reason in the public, what will it happen? It will bring out speculation. We'll start thinking, okay, he might have done some wrong, or government might be not so happy with this particular kind of judge, so that is why they trans. Some kind of speculative ideas will come up, speculative thinking will come up. Probably that might be right or wrong, we don't know. Speculation. And independence of the judge. Because of this confusion only, these controversies always come up. They'll just try, in UPSC if they ask, they'll just tell you to analyze the problems or the controversy arises due to the judicial transfers. If you just write these aspects in one paragraph or something, that is sufficient. Actually, one part of the question that they'll ask, right? Later they'll be continuing with the question asking what are the issues and how will you resolve these things, or else tell me the procedure, what is the Supreme Court view with regard to judicial transfers and all. Let us see. Tell me, what is the Supreme Court view on judicial transfers? You can take a guess. If in mains you might not be studying everything, but you have to have that intuitive mindset to write an answer there. How will you write an answer? What could be the Supreme Court's view? You can think, no, you should have that intuitive mindset. If you are not having any idea of writing that particular answer, you need to have that intuition. Okay, Supreme Court might have said, you must have guessed something. At least 2 points you should write there. Otherwise, I'll tell you, there is no problem. Third judge's case, that is a very good point. Okay. Better judgment means? Even though they are giving better judgments, there is no stopping in transferring of judge, no. It is not about that thing. I think in the year 1977, in third judge's case is about collegium system, okay. They made the transferring system more robust. They want to make it more robust, okay. So that there will be some kind of 4 senior most judges, and with the inclusion of 2 chief justices of both the high courts where the transfer is taking place, between whom the transfer is taking place. That kind of thing is there in third judge's case which you are talking about. But firstly, 1977, Supreme Court has given one particular statement. It said that the judicial transfers is an exceptional measure. Okay, it's an exceptional measure, and it has to be undertaken only in the public interest. Okay, it has clearly stated by Supreme Court. So only in the public interest, and it should be taken as an exceptional measure, not as a freebie. Okay, I have come into the government, I'll transfer this judge. No, it cannot happen. Okay, exceptional case and in the public interest. These are the 2 words that Supreme Court has said. And then in 1994, Supreme Court has come up with new directive saying that a judicial transfer can be challenged Okay, under the power of judicial review. That means Supreme Court saying that we, under the power of judicial review, we will accept the challenge of judicial transfer if there is taking place, but this should be challenged by the judge who is being transferred itself. None of them will do. That is the case that happened in 2019 law. The judge has, without approaching Supreme Court, she has just resigned. Right? So it is a personal choice. We cannot comment on that anything. Okay? But Supreme Court has said judicial transfers are subject to judicial review, and the person or the judge who is being transferred is the one who should be challenging the transfer order. Okay? And then the case which you are talking about, 1998, the third judge's case. So, it is said that in any kind of transfer, the CJI, the Chief Justice of India, should consult 4 other senior most judges of Supreme Court plus 2 Chief Justice of High Court. Okay? In case of a judge being transferred from the High Court, or if the judge being transferred is the Chief Justice of High Court, then these 2 need not be consulted. You are getting my point, no? If a judge of High Court is going to be transferred, the CJA has to consult 4 senior most judges and the 2 Chief Justices of High Court between whom the transfer is taking place. If the transfer of judge is Chief Justice of High Court itself, then 4 senior most judges of Supreme Court can be consulted. That is enough. These 2 are not required again. Right? So this is done in order to make that procedure more robust, or not more politically driven, more judicially driven, more administratively driven kind of decision. Now tell me the procedure that you will see. Procedure that you will see is, first the CJI will initiate the case, okay? And then he will transfer this to the 4, that collegium is there, no? In collegium, every judge has to give the written reply of their decision, or whether they should be transferred or not. Okay? And if the decision is okay, accepted by collegium, it will be transferred to the law ministry. Okay? And then it will go to the PM, who will advise the president to transfer. Right? This is the procedure that will take place. But however, in this procedure, what are the challenges, what are the issues that you are seeing?
Judicial independence or executive.
No. Why? Only for appointments they are appointed.
They are presently surprised by PM.
Hmm.
Presently surprised by PM. So their interest should be more. Executive will be more.
Executive interest will be more.
Based on the payment situation only, present have to act.
Yeah, that is okay. That is accepted procedure everywhere.
There will be some problem.
See, lack of transparency. Understand this collegium only. No need to go till Prime Minister. There is lack of transparency. This is a non-constitutional body, and there is no transparency in the procedure of judicial transfers or judicial appointment itself. Those are the 2 issues. Some kind of autocracy, autocratic institution which is not constitutional is playing a role in the transfer of judiciaries or judges or the appointments of judges, which is itself a problem. Okay, in the name of judicial independence we are doing it. So we require some kind of right balance here. What else? So how will you address this challenge? One collegium should go, or some kind of mechanism should be placed in order to make sure that the judges' appointments or judges' transfers will take place based on the administrative position, not on the political gains or political perspective. right? Only for the administrative reason they should be transferred, only in the public interest, right? So one thing is that we need to bring out some reforms in collegium system, and secondly we need to make the government should come up and should step up and say the reasons for specifying why this particular judge is being appointed or being transferred. At least these things should happen, right? These things should happen. Whether we'll see it or not, we don't know, but that is how we'll write a suggestion, right? Let us move on to the next topic now. No, why not? Why not? Why did that judge has resigned? If it is not a problem, we don't know what she is going through, so we cannot comment on that. But we should at least know that there are certain procedural problems that are still there. Until unless we find out, we won't be trying to refine it. Right? You are getting my point, no?
But it would be difficult to bring this reform. Integrity cannot enter into.
Obviously, that is there.
And judiciary want collegium system to be there.
Yeah, that is there. So there is some kind of memorandum and understanding that the government as well as judiciary has signed, Supreme Court has signed, and there is no progress there. That is where the public should come up and say where is the, and there are various articles that have come up and questioning where is the status of this memorandum of understanding that is going through after this what is called 4th judge case which nullified the National Judicial Appointments Commission, right? So after that there was some kind of middle ground that the Supreme Court as well as the government was trying to come up. They have come up with some kind of memorandum of understanding or agreement, and there is no follow-up of that particular thing that is taking place. That is a problem now, right? That is a very good option that the both judiciary and executive should come and sit together and find a solution, right? Let us go on. So gallantry awards, it is very trivial for me to bring this gallantry awards, but it is not trivial by seeing this year's UPSC prelims, right? Have you seen the question of Bharat Ratna? Right, so these are not trivial questions right now. They are very much important. They are carry two marks for you guys, right? See, India, there are two kinds of awards that give, okay? Two kinds of awards that Indian government gives majorly. Civilian, right? Civilian awards, sorry, and then gallantry awards. What are the civilian awards? Everyone knows Padma Shri, Padma Bhushan, Padma Vibhushan and Bharat Ratna, right? And for whom they are being given? Yeah, no, not particularly literature, any field the person is excelling, okay? That is why it has been amended and given to Tendulkar no, in the year 2014. So the person who is excelling in his field is being given these awards. So tell me, can these awards be given posthumously? Okay. This fact is clear. This one, gallantry awards also they can be given, okay, remember. Is there any monetary grant? Yes? There is no monetary grant. Remember. They will be given a scroll and a citation, that's it. Right? Or coming to Bharat Ratna, now tell me, how many members can be given Bharat Ratna? That was a statement in this year's prelims. Only 2? No. Maximum 3 people. But there are instances where 4 people were given Bharat Ratna. Do you know that? In the year 1999, 4 people were given Bharat Ratna. Now tell me, is it given only to citizens or can it be given to foreigners also? Can it be given? Are there any examples, previous examples? Remember the great person Nelson Mandela. If you remember this one particular person, you will agree that okay, Bharat Ratna will be given to foreigners also. And there is one more person, Abdul Ghaffar Khan. Right? Remember, maximum 3 people will be given, and then in 1919 there is an instance where 4 people were given, and there one more statement that has come in prelims which stated that is Bharat Ratna has not been given in one particular year or missed one particular year. No, it is not like that. There are several years where Bharat Ratna has not been given, especially during emergency or this wars that we had with China, Pakistan, okay, Bangladesh liberation event, and during Kargil war, we haven't given Bharat Ratna. Okay, there are many instances, not just one particular instance, okay, or one particular year. Now coming to gallantry awards. So there are 6 gallantry awards. I think there are some wrong. Yeah. Okay. This is Paramveer Chakra, Mahavir Chakra, Veer Chakra, and then Ashok Chakra, and then Kirti Chakra, Shaurya Chakra. Okay, and then you need to remember the order of preference, like what in the importance of each award is also being given. And remember, it is very easy to remember, you can remember alternatively. 1 is greater than, 4 is greater than, 2 is greater than, 5 is greater than, 3 is greater than 6. Okay. First primary importance is Paramveer Chakra and the least importance is Shaurya Chakra, alternatively. And there is one particular difference between these 2 awards. What is the difference? Okay, not in the medal itself, at the nature of the awards itself. I am telling you the difference. So these awards, these Veer Chakra awards, are given to the personnel who have done or performed an exceptional courage or displayed exceptional courage or values of self-sacrifice in the event of presence of enemy, in front of an enemy. That is why Abhinandan, our hero pilot, has been given Paramveer Chakra. Okay. So in the face of enemy, any personnel is showing that kind of caliber or ability of being self-sacrificed, right? Showing excellence in its field, okay? Showing courage in those all aspects in front of enemy. So this is in other areas, not in front of enemies or any other thing, like in any kind of exercise that we have with different countries. If he is showing such kind of exemplary courage or performance there, he will be given such kind of things. Or he might have died also. All these awards can be given even after death. So now tell me, will these awards have monetary reward? Like Bharat Ratna? No? No is correct answer, but they are receiving something called as monetary allowance. Like every month they will be sent a stipend to that person or their family, and it ranges from 20,000 for Paramveer Chakra to 6,000. Okay, for Shaurya Chakra. I can write for every, but it's not important. Right? There is a monetary allowance. There is no monetary grant given to them, but there is a monetary allowance that these people or their family will be receiving a monthly stipend of so and so rupees. Right? Now, one more fact which I wanted to tell you. So, in the order of preference, the Bharat Ratna recipient, where he will be standing? Remember, his position will be in 7th, like starting from president. Right? And connecting these two, there is one important connectivity to our constitution. What is it? Gallantry awards, Bharat Ratna awards. 4, not 4. But you are right, you are somewhere coming close. Article 18, okay. Abolition of titles. Yeah, they are answering anyway. Abolition of titles. So, what does this article say? No person will be having any kind of title like Maharaja, Raja, Raja Devira. Okay, these are not required now, since all are equal now. We are having that principle that used to be followed. But however, these awards will not be considered as a title. Okay, nevertheless, they should not be used as a prefix or suffix of their name. Okay, this is an exception that is provided, but that is given by Supreme Court itself. Okay, that kind of understanding of this Bharat Ratna or these gallantry awards provided by Supreme Court. It is not particularly written in the Constitution, right? So how will the person now say, okay, Bharat Ratna Grahita, the recipient of Bharat Ratna and so person. That is how the person will be named or addressed, right? Otherwise, using it as a title, either in the prefix or suffix, is not agreeable. And remember, these civilian awards can be annulled by the government. That means they can be taken away by the government. Remember this one more fact also, right? Let us move on to the next topic now. The State of Global Democracy report. I think most of you, who has given this report? International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance. It might be a prelims based question. Okay, this is an international NGO. It's based in Stockholm. Where is Stockholm? Sweden. Okay, I'm happy. Very good. Right? So what does this report says about democracy? Again, very important topic for your mains as well as essay writing. It says that since the past 20 years, there is a decline in democratic credentials. Okay. And it says that most of the countries are adopting authoritarian tactics or not democratic way of process of bringing reforms or anything. Authoritarian tactics are being employed by the countries. Most of the established democracies itself are doing it. That is what the report is saying. And then this decline or this backwardness or of rise in the democracy is the longest since the third wave. What is this third wave of democracy? I'll tell you it. I'll tell you so that it will be helpful for you in later while you read this thing. Particularly, there is something called as democratic wave theory, which is given by political scientist called Samuel P. Huntington. Okay, and he said that he is political science analyst from Harvard University. Okay, he is a very important person. He gave this democratic wave theory, and he said that there are three waves of democracy, three waves of democracy that we have seen in this world. First wave is after or till the World War II, since the emergence of what do you say, American Revolution and all, since then, since the start of then, okay, till the World War II. Okay, and then second wave from World War II to 1970. Okay, and then the third wave is from 1970s to the present date. So these waves during these years, there is surge in raise in democratic countries, and the report is trying to analyze these kind of waves only. It is saying that presently the third wave, there is a decline in democratic credentials in the world in this third wave, and the decline is the longest since the past 20 years. That is what the report is trying to say. Okay, there is a graph that you will see about the three waves of democracy. There is a graph that is being provided in various scholars, how the democracy has been growing since like 1784 is the American Revolution, no? There is a slide. This is how the wave they are drawing. Okay, this decline is due to this is a period of World War I. Okay, and this decline is between World War I and World War II. We have seen the rise of authoritarian regimes during this particular point of time. If you remember Italy, Germany, even Russia, these all. Okay, they are having authoritarian tactics or all something such kind of things, and then this third this wave somewhere here in the 1970s, the third wave has started, but it has peaked after the disintegration of USSR in the year 1991, right? So Eastern European countries have started accepting democratic credentials. They have started having voting and all. Estonia, Latvia, Poland, Belarus, Romania, all these countries. So now there is a slight dip, they are saying. Most of the countries are showing interest in having an authoritarian regime, and then even the democracies which are established are following the tactics of authoritarianism, right? Which are not democratic as such, they are saying. Now tell me, where is India's place in this report? They have not ranked any countries, but they have commented saying that India is in democratic decline. India is a democratic declining country, right? And they have said that it is moderately placed. They gave a medium level, so its position has not changed much given by under this report. But there are other reports also which we need to remember for our prelims point of view. There is something called as Wiedem Institute, which releases ranking and which releases comments saying that India is in the sense that it is not having any kind of substantive democracy. That is what they are saying. I have told you in one of your current affairs class, there are two kinds of democracy which we will see: procedural democracy and then substantive democracy. Have I mentioned it or not? Right? So India is a electoral autocracy, that they are saying. Electoral autocracy. Democracy is only for elections. That is what they are saying. Okay, they are giving a name, but for our understanding, that is enough. So there is another report which is called as Freedom House. I think it is a German-based organization. Okay, and it has said that Indian democracy is partly free. Partly free. Okay, these data you can write in when you are writing an answer with regard to democracy or even essay. But remember these things: Freedom House, or for prelims point of view, Freedom House, Wiedem Institute, and this Global State of Democracy report, which institution has been giving. Okay, right? From prelims point of view. You are getting my point, no? Are there any other awards that were mentioned in news, which I was remembering right now? There is Indira Gandhi's Peace, Disarmament and Development Award that has been announced recently. So in 2015 or 2014, I don't remember the year, there was a question asked, who was awarded the Indira Gandhi Peace, Democracy and Disarmament Award? Okay. Previous year's question that was there, that is why I am telling you. Which organization or an individual? Okay, the award will be given by the Indira Gandhi Memorial. Okay, it is given annually, right? Remember these facts. And then this year the recipient is the Pratham NGO. Have you heard of this NGO? So what is the prominence of this NGO? Education? No. Prominence is something which immediately should come is ESSER report. Annual status of education report that you guys is a UPSC favorite report, okay? Pratham has received the award okay? It will be given both to the individuals as well as for organizations, Indians as well as foreigners. Okay, remember these facts. And there is a monetary benefit here. Okay? Monetary grant is given whoever is winning this award. Okay? Anyway, let us move on to the next area. The Project 75. Recently, INS Vela has been commissioned. Okay. So, what is this Project 75? What is the background of this? The background starts from the Kargil war. Okay. After Kargil war, it was decided that within 30 years, we need to have at least 24 submarines in our Indian waters. Now, how many are there? Approximately 17 to 18 are there. Okay, we are still to reach there. I think 17. Okay, that was the idea. From that idea only this Project 75 has been developed. So in this Project 75, there are 6 submarines that are being built within our India with the help of French government. Okay. Mazagaon dock from Mumbai is constructing with the help of French support. Okay, the technology transfer or the skills that we need required to build this are all coming from France. Okay, there are 6 submarines to be built. They are nuclear powered. No, yeah, very good. They are diesel powered. Okay.
They are not accepting the nuclear power. USA putting sanctions now.
No, we are not in the nuclear suppliers group, okay? That grouping is there, no nuclear suppliers group. That is very much, that membership in that particular group is required in order to build that level of technology. But we are having nuclear submarines. Nuclear power submarines are there. What are those? There are 2 nuclear, no, there is one which is active, which is being built now. INS Arihant. Is a nuclear powered submarine, okay? And it can carry nuclear ballistic missiles. It is indigenously built without any kind of foreign support. And then with this only we are next coming up with INS Arighat. Remember, it is still in the development stage. Okay? These are nuclear powered submarines. And these are included in this 24 number, okay, that we are planning. So these are diesel powered, diesel electric powered. What are the 6 submarines? Remember, there are 3 Ks and 3 Vs. Kalvari, Khanderi. Have you heard of this term Khanderi? Where did you hear? Khanderi caves. In your cultural Buddhist caves, you will be remembering, okay? They are in Maharashtra. Please go and refer. And then Kalavari, Khanderi, there is Karanj, I think. Yeah, Karanj. And then Vela, it has been recently commissioned, okay. And then Wagir, Wagshir. Okay, you did not remember them as such, but having an idea whenever one question comes up is very good. Either in prelims or when you write write an answer related to the indigenization of defense sector. This is something, the indigenization process that is taking place. If you remember this project and few names of this submarines, it is very important as a value addition for your answer, right? So diesel powered, and then DRDO has provided one more system for it, which will improve its stealth capabilities as well as the presence in the water for a longer time. That is air independent propellant system. Remember this, air independent propellant system. What will it help is that it will help the submarine to stay for longer without accessing oxygen. The submarine requires to come into subsurface level to get oxygen, and then it will go back. But this air independent propulsion system, it will not require. So they are having something called as phosphoric acid based fuel cell, okay. These propellants will have the phosphoric acid based fuel cell, which is science and technology related aspect, which will produce oxygen, right? So, and having this air independent propulsion system is also helping in the stealth capabilities of the submarine. That is because of reducing noise. It will reduce the noise of submarine. So in that way, two ways, this air independent propulsion system, which is indigenously developed by DRDO, is very significant within this project. But however, continuously you will be reading something called as Project 75I. What is this? It is nothing but, see, under this there are 6 submarines the government is trying to buy from the French. Okay. So now we are having 17, including them if we develop. 6 if we get, we are going to have 23. So 24 it will be INS Arigat. You are getting my point, no? Totally 24. By 2030 probably we should be achieving it. Right? Let us move on to the next topic now. So reforming fertilizer sector. This is the last topic. We will finish as quickly as possible. So a little bit of background you need to understand before going to a discussion of what are the issues with regard to the fertilizer sector. We need to have a little bit of background. What happened in the year 1955 with regard to fertilizer sector? Do you guys know? There is an act that has been enacted. Recently it has been, the amendments of this particular act have been repealed. Farmers only, one of the acts, one of the 3 acts related to farm laws. Yeah, Essential Commodities Act. Okay. Under this act, fertilizer sector has been given an essential commodity status. Why is it given? There is huge hoarding that is happening initially, right? But however, in 1973, okay, there is an oil crisis which raised the cost of fertilizers. Correspondingly, the agricultural productivity has declined. Cost of fertilizers has increased. The farmers are unable to afford it. That is why we have seen the decline in agricultural productivity. And by then we are having a huge success with the green revolution that we are in that kind of position, and having this agricultural decrease in agricultural productivity is a huge drawback at a particular point of time. So that is why after, I think, 1977, government has brought these fertilizer subsidies. In order to reduce the cost of purchase for the farmers. And these subsidies are provided for whom? Manufacturers. They are not directly given to the farmers. Manufacturers will be subsidized so that they will be selling these fertilizers to the farmers directly at a lower price. Right? So, from here the problem starts. Okay. Anyway, in 1991, we have opened up our economy. No, fertilizers are not just manufactured within India, we are also importing them now. Now our fertilizer price is not just dependent on domestic market as well as international market now. It has aggravated the problem, and that was the report, the article that was that has been in news, that was saying that government has tried to reduce the fertilizer prices by not controlling it, but however they are unable to do it because of the obviously the farmers dharna that might be taking place, the huge opposition from the farmers as well as the opposition parties during that particular time. But anyway, they are unable to reduce the fertilizer prices. They are keeping on increasing, and then our subsidy bill has kept on increasing. Now tell me the issues with the fertilizer sector. Tell me, there are common points which you can, as I told you, you need to have that intuition.
More amount of urea usage.
Yeah, okay. Improper use. That, what is the cause of it? Okay, that is there, but what is the cause of it?
Due to low prices.
Yeah, very good.
That's a part of core industry.
Huh?
Fertilizer sector is a part of core industry.
Co-relationships.
Core industry.
Core industry. So, okay, wait. See. See, first thing, understand, huge regulation by the government itself with regard to fertilizer sector. Government involvement is huge. Micromanagement by the government of urea is the problem here. Suppose the current price of the fertilizer might be X, and government will tell that this is the price that you need to sell. That can remember that as Y. By subtracting it, you will receive Z. What is this Z? Subsidy. When this X is going to increase, what will happen to Z? That is the problem that is happening. We are not changing this price. The government is fixing on it. Micromanaging this price every time. Okay, that one major problem, that major involvement of government in the urea sector, urea fertilizer. Then second, low prices. Now, because it is the price with which the urea is being sold to the market. It will not, since it is a lower price, will it be reaching the farmers? No. See, low cost of urea, it will have two effects. One is, as she is pointing out, excessive usage. The required ratio, what is the required ratio of NPK? Very good. 4:2:1. And what is the ratio? In Punjab it is reaching to 31. The average you can go on saying that at most 15% or 4%, something like that. Right, approximation. You need to justify your points. That is what more important in your answer. You will not be exactly correct in your pointing out these ratios or all. And what else the second effect of this low price? No. Where can be urea used? Adulteration of milk. Remember that, connect those points. Getting my point, no? Black marketing. When that kind of black marketing of this urea takes place, when farmers are unable to access urea at this price that the government has fixed, the farmers are going to reach this market only to access fertilizers. It is not benefiting farmers again. Getting my point, no? Third, international volatility. Let me clear this. What is this? what is the one particular price or the product on which the fertilizer production will be dependent, which is affecting the volatility in prices of fertilizers? If you think of that, this point is clear. Oil, natural gas. You are seeing now, oil prices are increasing. Correspondingly, natural gas or liquefied natural gas prices will be increasing, though they are lower than the crude oil price. So that is where the cost of production of fertilizers has been increasing. That is why it is said now urea for million tons it is costing $900, which used to be $270 in the year 2020 or 2019 before the pandemic. Right? So dependence of this oil or this natural gas is also one of the problem for us. So domestically some problems we can resolve, but international volatility we cannot, government cannot micromanage that one at least, right? So the domestic production or the import dependence, is it low or high? It is not that much of a problem, because for urea our requirement is about 35 to 35 million tons or something yearly requirement, and we are able to produce or manufacture at least 25 million tons. So there is a gap of 10. That is the quantity which we are importing. But however, even this particular 10, if 1 rupee increase in this particular or quantity itself is a problem for us, right? So import dependence, that too only urea. What is the case of other aspect, or diammonium phosphate is one which we will use. There is huge requirement, we are depending on imports only there for that particular fertilizer, right? So is the industry a clean industry? No. Fertilizer sector will create pollution, and according to Central Pollution Control Board, it is a red category industry. You know, no, this categorization of industries is taking place in our country right now. There are several red category, white category, orange category. They are categorizing these industries. So go back, it might be useful for your prelims. Okay. So this fertilizer sector is a red category industry. So it was found out by the CAG itself, the Comptroller Auditor General itself. I think the report has come in the year 2018 or 2017. It is still relevant that most of the fertilizer manufacturers are not using these fertilizer effluent free discharge units that they require to be placed in their manufacturing system. Okay, there are certain kind of norms that are there. Fertilizer discharge effluent norms are there, and they are bypassing it. They are not following these norms. That is what the Central Pollution Control Board is said. So that is also an issue which the government has to think of. So in that sense, what is the pathway that we need to go, that we need to adopt instead of using chemical fertilizers? There is a demand, raising demand, that government should start subsidizing biofertilizers or promote organic farming. But organic farming has, if you go to the farmer and ask him, will you adopt organic farming or not, he won't be ready, because he knows that production will decline for him. The profit or the amount of production that he has right now with regard to chemical fertilizers is going to decline for him. And we don't know that how long the decline would be for him to sustain. That is why it is not very easy to adopt organic farming. That is one of the drawbacks. But best way is biofertilizers. Okay. So these are almost, and then one more point which you can talk of it is cartelization. What is cartelization? Yeah, see, not just 2 or more than 3. For fertilizer sector, there are only 3 public sector units. from whom the government is purchasing or for whom the government is subsidizing, and it is not opening this sector for the private players to come in and produce the, what do you say, fertilizers. What will happen? It will increase the production and lower the cost, no? If you cartelize these three public sector units only to manufacture the fertilizers, they'll be having some kind of capacity. If they exceed their capacity, they cannot exceed their capacity to produce particular quantity of fertilizers. Okay? That means they are unable to increase their production. So obviously the prices, they keep on increasing. And then government is again fixing the prices there, that is micromanaging the urea price that is taking place. Right? So these are the issues that you are seeing. But are there any kind of innovative steps or kind of steps that the government is taking, or any person or an individual or a company is taking in this sector to bring some change? Remember, come on, soil health card. It will help farmers, it will raise awareness among the farmers to tell them how much the quantity of fertilizer that they should be using for one particular soil or one particular crop that they are going to raise. That is help that soil health card is going to do. And then neem coated urea, how is it going to help? So it is scientifically observed that neem coated urea will be absorbed into the soil very slowly. And efficiency of uptake, this urea uptake by the plants is also going to increase. So they won't just dump there each and every time. So there is a slow absorption of urea that is going to take place in the soil. So there is less quantity of urea that can be used for a longer period of time. And then the efficiency of intake of this nutrient is improving with this neem coated urea. So two ways it is going to help, but still the procedure is there, though we are writing it, the problem is still persisting. We are having. Is there any new product that has come up with related to urea? Nano urea? But nowadays, I don't specifically encourage this particularly nano urea because there are certain drawbacks that are coming up right now recently. The productivity has not much improved as such with the use of nano urea. Okay, still experiments are going to take place. Is there any other thing which I forgot? Okay. NBS, what is NBS? Nutrient based subsidy scheme that the government has. What is this nutrient based subsidy scheme? Now, like MSP, every year we are giving certain price for a particular crop for particular quantity, right? So for potassium or for this phosphorus, we are having this nutrient based subsidy scheme in the sense that annually government will fix the price of subsidy based on the quantity of that particular nutrient. So this scheme is being covered, under the scheme only phosphorus and potassium are being covered but not the urea. Why? Huge market, there is a huge political gains for this political parties to take care of. But anyway, this urea should be brought into this nutrient based subsidy scheme. Then only this micromanaging of this urea, over regulation of the government in this urea sector or fertilizer sector will pass away. Right? And then that is how you need to write of way forward or in a conclusion. Okay? Or else the import dependence, we need to reduce it. How will you reduce the import dependence? Either by increasing the production, or another aspect is we need to reduce the usage of chemical fertilizers also. How will you counter it? Either by promoting organic farming or biofertilizers or zero budget natural farming. And then not only this, continuously we need to bring out awareness among the farmers, that soil health card which we are providing, right? All these aspects should come together. Otherwise, major thing is regarding the over regulation of urea sector. Okay, until unless it is, then this problem will persist. No matter how much awareness that you bring out for the farmers. NBS, okay. This nutrient-based subsidy scheme is such that subsidy will be fixed by the government annually for a particular nutrient, quantity of the nutrient. For 1 quintal, this is the subsidy amount that we are going to provide for the phosphorus and potassium, right? But that means it is being revised every year, no? They are fixing annually. It is fixed. But for urea, the price that is being fixed by the government is staying constant. The price in the as I told you in the initially, X is the current price, current market price. But the government will fix Y should be the price at which it should be sold in the market, and the excess will be the subsidy. So this is increasing, but the government has had a fixation on this. It is not increasing this Y, the price of urea, highly regulated. You getting my point, no? Right, we'll end here. Yeah, Murthy, I have been seeing your comments here. Don't worry. Yeah, most of your answers are correct. Yeah, don't worry there. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. We'll end here. We'll meet next week. Thank you.